Joining us now is James Fox. He is the director, documentarian with a new film out called The Program. He previously has done Moment of Contact, The Phenomenon, I Know What I Saw, Out of the Blue, Moment of Contact, a personal favorite of mine. We've got a trailer, and then we're going to be talking to James himself. Let's take a listen.
In 2017, the New York Times published a story exposing a secret government program investigating UFOs.
That story was kind of a catalyst for a lot of things that have happened since. Members of Congress started to ask questions.
Instruments report there is something there.
There are flight characteristics that we can't explain.
UAPs are unexplained. It's true. They need to be investigated.
Here we are having a hearing where just a few years ago, we didn't even acknowledge that these things were real.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
You're telling me people have come forward claiming firsthand knowledge of craft of non-human origin?
That's correct.
So, James, you've exposed a lot of new information in this documentary, just as you have in the past. I was in the room for that hearing. It was a really exciting moment. Just tell us a little bit about why you decided to make this film after previous ones, about specific incidents, and some of the big things that you learned.
So, thanks for the intro. I did The Phenomenon. The natural progression was The Program, because The Phenomenon hinted at crash retrievals. We went into Roswell, but then I took a break and I focused on an alleged UFO crash case that happened in Varginha, Brazil in 1996, and ultimately made a film about it called Moment of Contact. And the allegation is, half the town has heard about it, that a UFO crashed and that live aliens were captured, and ultimately the United States flew in. And that was an aspect that I'd learned on my last trip to Brazil. I investigated the case over 12 years with a partner, Marco Leal, who's Brazilian, and a number of other folks. And so my natural progression was, okay, now that I'm pretty sure the Americans were involved in this crash retrieval, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to investigate, because the case goes cold once the United States Air Force plane took off from a place called Campinas and back to the United States. And we have the Brazilian flight control officer who went on the record just recently publicly describing that United States, he called it USAF, United States Air Force plane that flew back to the States. The case went cold. But little did I know, 5 months after I released Moment of Contact, there would be a high-level intelligence officer testifying under.
It's too bad that every single UFO event or case we hear about, you hear about the American government putting their tentacles into. Every time. They rushed down there to Varginha, swooped up the craft and the aliens, for all I know. They're hiding this secret from the world, and they're taking charge of it. We need to change that somehow.
Oath to a bipartisan group of lawmakers that we have a crash retrieval program and that biologics were. So he opened the door for me, and so that made it a lot easier for me to ask those questions that I never in my 30-year career thought I'd be asking sitting members of Congress. Do we have aliens? Do we have recovered flying saucers? You know, you'd think they would be asking me to up the dosage of the medication that I'm not on, but that's where we are right now. And then you look at the legislation that's been written in the NDAA for 2023 and 2024. It's right there in black and white.
You're exactly right.
Crash retrieval materials potentially, and legacy programs. So we're living in unprecedented times right now.
The government has publications putting out crash retrieval information, sicknesses from being near a craft that landed. I mean, they're all practically admitting to this phenomenon already. I don't understand why people don't go with that and see this as like a new beginning. These UFOs, there's got to be drivers in some of them.
Best job in your film of actually bringing everything that we know to light, and what can you give away to us? What can you tell the audience?
I would say that one of the aspects of the film that's jaw-dropping, slack-jawed, I think is the exact terminology that was used. There is a high-level government official correspondence with former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Christopher Mellon, that he shared. He eventually went through the DOPSR process, pre-publication approval. and it's a correspondence between a high-level government official. Now, in the film, it's got some redactions, but it has the actual name of the gatekeeper to the crash retrieval program. And that unredacted version was given to select members of Congress, and I'm told people at Arrow. So John Kosklowski theoretically would have the name of the gatekeeper, certainly in 2020, of the.
I hope there's going to be a picture, folks. I did not watch it ahead of time, but the title certainly would lend evidence to that.
Crash retrieval program. And I think that's an aspect. It's huge. I mean, that means that there are members of Congress that have the name of who's in charge of this crash retrieval program, or the gatekeeper.
Right, we have the gatekeeper, we have the name, and it is a frustrating process, but that's government. It takes a huge effort to to reveal a huge secret. That's something that I always say. James, with respect to your film, you spent a lot of time here in Washington. What was the receptivity, the bipartisanship on this issue? Were you heartened by it? Are you excited about what may become from the next administration?
I am unbelievable. It's so refreshing to see a bipartisan group of lawmakers working together for the American people. It's like, oh, thank you. This is such a breath of fresh air. Let's continue this. Who knows that it took, so-called aliens to get us to unite and work together. But I would like to say it's very exciting. Some people feel like things aren't moving fast enough. I'll remind you, as someone who's been investigating this field, I've made 6 documentaries over the last 30 years. We've had 3 congressional hearings where we've had people testify under oath about the reality of the phenomenon.
And nothing ever came of any of them. Of course, he's talking about the first one, I guess, in 69. And then 2023, 2024. I haven't seen any changes yet. Any disclosures, any information on the drones. Yesterday, watching a podcast, this gentleman was talking about, he's in the Air Force, 2 pilots had head out, which would have been 3 nights ago now. They went off the coast offshore to follow up on a drone that they had seen. And as they approached the drone, the avionics in both aircraft ceased working, started shutting down. The aircraft still flew, of course, the engine's still running. But it turned off everything. Where have we heard that before? For the last 60 years, we've heard nothing but airplanes being turned off in mid-flight because they got too close to a UFO. Well, apparently that's what these 2 sticks did. And apparently one of them was white as a ghost. The person who was relaying this information, had his face covered, obviously, he's in the military. He said that the pilot was white as a sheet, that he had been frightened by what he saw and what had happened.
Separately, one in 2023, David Grush, and another one in 2024, Lou Elizondo, testify under oath to a group of bipartisan lawmakers that we have a crash retrieval program. I'm reminded what Senator Rounds just recently said. I was there, I filmed it. He said, I know things feel like they're moving slowly. I feel the frustration. Things aren't happening fast enough. We're not getting enough answers. I'll remind you that we are not running a 100-yard dash. This is a marathon. Stick with us. Let's continue providing support to this bipartisan group of lawmakers, and let's get to the bottom of it, because the implications are global and so profound that we owe it to ourselves to continue the support.
James, while I have you, one of the things that has captured the nation's attention was this New Jersey drone, quote unquote, incident. And I'd be curious for your thoughts, not necessarily about the incident itself, but in the context of what you and I know from studying this issue, which is that we have had long-time incidents of unidentified craft being and interfering with U.S. military installations, some of the video and other. I know you talk about some of this in your show, I think the 1994 incident in Nellis Air Force Base. I'm curious if you could just shed some light about the patterns that we've seen now over the last 75 years in the United States and how this might fit into that.
Well, I'd say a very good case would be the 2 consecutive weekends in July of 1952, where you had incursions by these so-called orbs, UAP, UFOs. We had military jets scrambled. It was on the front page of every newspaper across the country 2 consecutive weekends. And we scrambled military jets to intercept these things. They flew rings around us. I cover this extensively in the film The Phenomenon, but that was 1952. I mean, they had one of the biggest press conferences with General John Sanford at the time, who basically came forward back in 1952. I have to keep saying that. It said, yeah, there's something really inexplicable going on. It's not us. We don't think it's a foreign adversary. We don't know what's going on. And it's like, that seems to be a big repeat today. Now, I'll remind your audience that, yeah, the vast majority of UAP, of UFOs can and have been explained away in down to earth.
They haven't even tried to change the play code. Just deny.
Conventional terms, and I'm sure there's a lot of them up there, up in the sky, that are being misidentified. Everyone's up in the night sky trying to get a glimpse of these things, but there's a core 15 or 20%. And I think that these recent drone sightings will ultimately a core of 15, 20% that seem to defy a terrestrial or a conventional explanation. Could I be wrong? I could absolutely be wrong.
Right.
But that's my take on all the intel folks that I've been talking to recently. Particularly 50 of these things came off the ocean and baffled the Coast Guard and police.
Right, and when you hear the testimony from these law enforcement officials, what I often find is important is to go lower down the rung, because the lies are at the top, right? But when you hear from the people, the Coast Guard, the actual police officers, the governors, some of the state legislators, they have no idea what's happening. Not only do they have no idea, they're reporting to us about the ability to just quote unquote go dark, and then there's generally a temporary amnesia, across the country where we just seem to forget about these things. But within the pattern, as you just set out, you laid out, that's an excellent part of the phenomenon. Actually, right where I am here in Washington, some of these incidents occurred here, right over our own airspace. With all of this, it does seem as if some progress is being made in the last decade. I do credit that 2017 New York Times article. So any just last words you want to say for why people should watch the film and put it in the context of this body of work in this moment of time?
We are living in unprecedented times. There is a current effort happening right now, today, a push, unprecedented push for transparency on this issue. It's gotten the attention of lawmakers, household names, intel folks. There's whistleblowers coming forward. I'm told somewhere between 8 and 12 first-hand witnesses. Everyone's saying they want firsthand. Grush was not a first-hand witnesses that have met in skiffs behind the scenes. Kirk McConnell, former Senate Armed Service Committee staff member, talks about it in the program. It's happening. Be patient, continue support. This story is going to be huge.
All right. Well, I'd love to see it. Everybody go watch the film. We'll have a link down in the description on where you can. And check out James's entire body of work, one of my favorite journalists on the issue. We appreciate you joining us, sir. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Hey, if you like that video.
Hey, so I enjoyed that. I hope you did too. That was our breaking points. I just want to shed a little light on the documentary that James has coming out. With that, I'll bid you adieu, and thank you very much for being here with me.